All right, hello and welcome to SalesBox TV, where B2B marketing leaders from across the globe share strategies and best practices to help accelerate pipeline and revenue growth. My name is Meg Floyd. I am your host for today, and I am honored to have Jordan Adams as our guest today. Jordan is the CEO and founder of OneNineFive. And Jordan, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Megan. We've been trying to make this work for a couple of weeks. It's delighted that we've got there.
We finally made it. I'm so excited. First, I know I mentioned just a little bit, about your title, but I would love to hear more from you. Can you introduce yourself and let people know about your agency?
Yeah, sure. So we are a full-service demand gen agency. We're based in London. However, we have offices globally, both in the US and the Middle East and Sydney. The business was built from a coffee table. It's the organic founder entrepreneurial journey, and we were acquired by the Agent 3 group a year ago. So as we sit here today, we help B2B enterprise organizations find their next customer. So we're a full service demand gen agency. And I've been very fortunate that, having built the business from scratch, have done every job and managed to successfully sack myself from every job. So here we are today, hopefully talking a little bit about my journey.
Awesome. Well, you did say you're a demand gen specialist, and I would love to dig into that. I mean, today there's so many new frameworks and definitions: demand gen, lead gen, ABM. Now we have the revenue waterfall. I'd love to hear just your take on, what does it all mean? What's demand gen? What's the difference between lead gen and even ABM?
Well, I think I would certainly be retired if I had $1 for every time I've tried to get into the weeds of the difference between demand gen, lead gen, and ABM. But I think very simplistic, based on the audience and seniority of some of the people that watch this. Demand gen is about creating demand. It's about brand awareness. It's about sharing with individuals a problem they might not know they have. And that trickles to then creating leads. And lead gen is around getting a prospect to drive an action inwards. So demand is about taking the message outwards and recognizing there might be a challenge. And lead gen is around somebody putting their hand up and recognizing they have that problem. ABM, I'm a big believer that ABM was created as a framework to make sure that the constant tussle between sales and marketing was accountable under one metric. So I think it was designed by some very smart marketeer that said, how do I get the sales team to buy into what I'm trying to do? But ABM is about relationships. So ABM is not a tactic you use in a cold market. You use ABM when you have some element of a relationship that might be very early on. So demand is about creating awareness and demand. Leads is about turning demand into an opportunity. And ABM is about bridging a relationship or building on a relationship you currently have. I think the difference between all three is around the patience and expectation to make any one of those strands work.
That's excellent. Well, what about just as far as the definitions of leads? I mean, we hear MQLs are dying these days, but how do you measure that demand? And there's MQLs, SALs, SQLs too. So what matters, what metrics, or how should marketers really be defining success?
Well, I think the acronyms that have come out of this industry never fail to amaze me. I don't think a month goes by where there's not a new one. Recently today, and I've been doing this for 15 years, I heard a new one to me, which is a PQL. And a PQL is now a product qualified lead. So these acronyms continue to come out. If we go back to the first acronym that came out of the lead gen world, which was dare I whisper it, BANT, budget, authority, need, and time. That was created by IBM in the 1970s as a way to scale their sales reps to be able to identify how hot an opportunity was. And here we are in 2023, still using BANTs as often a framework to qualify leads. If we look at MQLs and SQLs, there's a debate whether it was Pardot or HubSpot that came up with the terminology. But the key link to all of these acronyms is probably two things. One, normally the source of where the term came from a tech company, and it was designed to invigorate and show how to get their product working. So it hasn't typically come from a marketeering background. It's come from a tech company wanting to use their product more, so they build an acronym that's easy to understand. But the other piece around it is marketers today, I think you need some industry acronyms that work, but I think you need your own terminology within your business. And whether it's an MQL, an SQL, a PQL, as long as your business understands where that sits, I don't think it really needs to sit in any particular name, providing you understand where it's come from and what you're trying to do with it. So don't get bogged down with the latest terminology, because there's a long list on a wall in front of me of the latest ones, and I don't think that trend is going to go away anytime soon.
Do you think there's a certain formula that they should be thinking about in regards to that? I mean, it's really, do what's best for your business or what you think is going to be relevant to your business. But have you seen kind of a formula to measure that success that maybe has been different or shifted as a result of all of these new ways to define a qualified lead?
I think broadly speaking, it's all about attribution, which is an obvious statement. And I think as long as there is consistency over what outcome you're attributing to what terminology, and that's consistent, for me, that's enough. And to expand on that, all too often we will continue to look at different metrics and models to try and find the same answer. And what I always advise to marketers is be consistent, and then have the patience to stick with it until you feel you've done enough time to recognize if you need to change it. And if you look at the great businesses that have been built from scratch, or the great product lines.
Yeah, that's such good advice, because it can be kind of a reactive environment these days where it's just, you gotta fix something, gotta make it work. And so that's really great advice to be patient. Just as far as, just to stay in line with that, what are some strategies and tactics that are working today? I mean, there's so many different tools. I'm sure business and marketers get tons of emails and calls from everybody, saying similar things, that they can do this and do that. I mean, what do you feel is a strategy or tactic that really is generating that demand for your clients?
I think, slightly turn the question on its head, but hopefully gives the same answer. If I look at 2023 and the tactics, I think this year is about channel. I think it's about the inability to experiment at scale, because typically budgets are tighter, budgets are more constrained. So I think sticking to a channel that is directly linked to where your community hang out. So rather than think about tactics or shortcutting or what's the latest fad, the latest trend, think about the people that you're trying to sell to. Where do they hang out? Where do they consume information? Where do they physically hang out? Where do they spend their time when they're not in your eye line? And if you understand where the community hang out, then you can quickly work out what's the right channel to get to them. If they're a silo channel and they don't come collectively together, there isn't a forum, there isn't events, then you might want to use a very direct tactic. You might want to be thinking about direct mail or telemarketing, or a channel that allows you to have a one-to-one conversation. If you're talking about a community that sits in a place that can be a shoal of fish gathered, you might want to be thinking about content syndication or data insight or propensity. So I think, as opposed to talking about what's the tactic that's hot today, I think it's two things. Think about the community you're trying to reach, and then think about the smartest channel that gets you there. And often that's really where the art of getting results quickly or at a better rate or a better velocity. So I don't think it's one size fits all. I don't think there's a tactic that stands today that is hotter or colder than ever before. I think the smart marketers are using the right channel, and the channel is not predicated about what's hot. It's about, they know that that channel is the right channel to reach that audience, or as I would call it, community. I think 2023 is about community marketing, is how I'd class it.
Yeah, that is so good, because it's really all about relationships, right?
Right.
Customers can get the information as quickly, very, very quickly. So it's really, how can you be that guide? How can you help me get to the answers that I need, and really form that relationship? That's such a great advice there. So do you still think that there needs to be a healthy mix of inbound, outbound in that, or just as far as generating that demand, do you still think that you need to consider both, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you definitely need to have the right balance and right mix of both inbound and outbound. I think whether you're doing inbound or outbound on a particular scale, I think the main thing is that the experience is consistent. Most outbound opportunities are to drive people in. So if the opportunity you're casting out has one experience, and then when they come in, it has another, that can feel false, and that can feel uncomfortable and not right, and you can lose authenticity. So whether your tactics are largely outbound or largely inbound, the thing to really think about is the messaging might be different because you're trying to serve different challenges, but there should be a red thread of consistency around the experience. And often where we see failure when we're working with clients is the outbound tactic, the messaging might be a fantastic story, narrative, problem solve. But the minute that becomes, I'm interested now, let's become an inbound opportunity, that experience falls away. So try and look at what is the experience if we go and approach somebody versus what's the experience if they find us. And often you find that there's a very large gap between those two experiences. And where you get the perfect blend of both is actually to get some consistency, that when you reach out to somebody, people forget that they now become an inbound opportunity. So I would say the heady mix of both is absolutely what marketers need to do. But again, it goes back to that word consistency.
Yeah. So do you think that means that, you talk about experience and just making sure that's consistent? Do you feel like the tech stack is, tech stacks today? I'd love to get into that, because it's just does that mean they need to look at different tools, or just kind of maybe consolidate in order to have a more consistent experience? Or just talk to me about how do they get to that point, or what are some steps that maybe they can take in order to create that consistent experience if it's not there today?
Well, I think if we look at the MarTech landscape, which is now becoming a almost Where's Wally of technology, just impossible.
It really is.
It's just so challenging. And I really do feel for marketers in terms of their selection process. But if we were to broadly brush marketing technology into three buckets, I think the first bucket is when we go out to market, what is the personalization that we can use technology to drive at scale? So there's technology that allows a personal feel, and that's video technology, that's automation, that is around consistency of serving messaging that's appropriate to the individual. So there's personalization. How do we make each experience feel personal? The second group of technology is how do we get customer nurture or prospect nurture to feel consistent and get from A to B? So how do you use technology to understand where somebody is and get them from A to B? And then the third piece of technology is how we're monitoring the success of technology 1 and 2. So how do we look at the technology we're using to make tweaks and to make efficiencies? Whenever I'm speaking to marketers about technology, which typically is the starting conversation, I always ask them to think about all of the tech that you've got under the bonnet, 40, 50 layers of technology.
Yeah.
If you were to bucket it into those three boxes, what would it look like? Have you got a disproportionate amount of technology just looking at what metrics you should manage, which, by the way, is where most marketers seem to be. Most of their technology is about performance, as opposed to have we got enough technology that talks about how data moves through our system? Or have we got enough technology that allows our personalization, our customer experience to be great? I think where you need to make the least investment is actually around tools that monitor how you're performing. I think you want to put your money towards how do we make our customers feel better through technology, and then how do we service that opportunity better? So I think in today's world with using technology, if I had one place to invest that I think helps drive demand, I think it's about where can you use technology that helps increase personalization. What can you
that is so great to kind of put it into those three buckets. I haven't ever thought of it like that. Really simplifies and helps you do a good analysis of your current stack in a way that kind of goes along with how buyers go along that journey. So very good. So I would love to just hear, what is keeping CMOs up at night, in your opinion? What are some things, there's the tech stack, there's metrics they've got to hit. There's a lot of pressure for CMOs today. And all that pressure is through an extreme amount of change, uncertainty, and they've got less resources to do it, right? And sometimes often less budget. So I'm curious, what's kind of keeping them up? Where are they focused on in 2023?
Well, by nature of the work that we do, our communication and our frequency of interaction with CMOs is daily. And I think the starting piece for CMOs at the moment is, what am I doing to keep my job? We're in a very volatile position. I think that is keeping people awake at night. We're hearing, mass reports around marketing again is the area that people either stick a twist with. And whilst I don't think CMOs are awake at night thinking, will I be in a job tomorrow? I think they're thinking about, how do I need to adapt in order to show the value of marketing, which is a battle that is often faced. We're seeing the rise again of CMOs being hired around performance. Performance marketers are suddenly the flavor of the month again, whereas before we had a period of time where it's about creativity and technology use. I think CMOs have been kept awake at the fear of burnout and their teams burnout. The cliche been asking to do more with less. How do we continue to drive innovation and experimentation when we haven't got broad budgets to play with? How do we still do things that we know drive performance when we can't risk experimentation as much? I think they've been kept away by emerging technologies. What's a fad? What's here to stay? CMOs have been asked, what is your plan for ChatGPT all of a sudden? And so I think, how they manage to navigate their way through technology, an advancement around AI. Where does that sit in our play? Something that wasn't on their eye line now suddenly needs to be. I think brand relevance, when you've got economic headwinds, how do you stay relevant in swirling noise, I think is often a challenge. And how do you deal with new heights of competitors? The market is highly commoditized no matter what sector you're in, and how do you stay relevant ahead of your competitors? And all of this in economic headwinds. So I think probably the key thing for CMOs that's keeping them awake at night today is, how do I drive a performance-based culture that can show we're driving value back into the business without damaging creativity, experimentation, brand identity? And how do I do that in a way that brings creative marketing and technology with me, rather than where it's tended to go in the past, which is just show me the leads you're bringing, the results you're bringing. Let's not go back to those days. Let's keep some sophistication. I think my overall piece on CMOs talking today and how we're supporting that, and some of the advice we're saying is, rather than look at campaign outcomes or campaign planning or campaign products, try and look at the metrics that are around campaign relevancy. What has that campaign brought in terms of the relevancy to the challenge you're trying to solve? Whereas before, the metrics have always been, have we achieved this campaign into market? So I think there's a lot keeping CMOs up. But I also think, to take a positive spin on it, that the opportunity to drive a business in when you've got less to play with, when you've got economic headwinds, when you are trying to stay brand relevant, I think many CMOs will create huge credit in the bank in terms of their personal career and their teams have been able to do some really smart stuff. Because often when your back's against the wall, you have less options to play with, the creativity comes through. So there's a lot keeping them awake at night. But I think most are seeing it as an opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, what is your opinion? How do you stay relevant in a world where it is very competitive? There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of ads, right? Everywhere you turn. what are some of just things that you think CMOs or other marketing teams could do to stay relevant today?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think you always need, in any form of marketing, to be empathetic to the environment you're marketing into. So taking a position on the market that you're going into, I think at the moment is pretty black and white. Your messaging is either going to be around, we understand that wallet share is tighter, we understand money's going to stay in a pocket, and we're going to build a marketing framework and thinking around cost, pricing, understanding that decisions take longer, you need to be more committed, so you're playing into the economic challenge. The other side is actually to play the other way, which is we're going to stand by what we always stood for, and we're almost going to put the economic scenario not even part of our messaging. And that is not that you're not being empathetic to the environment, you're staying true to your brand. Because lots of brands suddenly feel a little bit out of kilter because they are a brand that's really talked about economics or environmental impact or the health of economic backdrops. And then when they suddenly do it, it feels unauthentic. So brand relevancy to me is about authenticity. So stay on message and stay true to that message for a period of time. But I think to be relevant in today's market, either be really clear on what you want to be famous for, or show what the future could look like outside of the storm we're currently in. People either want to believe in the thing they can't touch and feel today and they can get there, or they want absolute double down on, if I buy that product, I know what they're a hero for, so it's a safe bet. I think.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so good. You mentioned that, right now it could be seen as, a time of risk, but also a time of opportunity. And we've been hearing a lot in the tech space, especially about all the layoffs, right? And for marketers, that it's like, oh no, marketing's on the chopping block during these times.
Right.
But I would love to take your take on this time where there is a lot of layoffs, where marketers maybe tend to kind of sit back and wait it through and see what happens. But I'd love to get your take. Is that what we should be doing, or how else could we look at this as, okay, this is the opportunity and I'm going to take it? I just would love to get your take on the recent layoffs. And again, how can we shift from, oh my goodness, this is a bad time, to, oh my goodness, this is a very exciting time, and look at the opportunities that are ahead of us as marketers today?
Yeah, I mean, it's tried and tested old ground, but whatever you do in life, don't get stuck in the middle. If you are going to try and run if you're going to run across a highway, either run or don't, but don't half have a go at running across the highway. You're likely to get hit. So it has always been the adage of, do you stick or twist? I'm a great believer that you have to have conviction and build momentum and build a positive environment that this is an opportunity, and go for it. And what I mean by go for it, you might not have the team, you might not have the budget that you had in prior years, but you still have the ambition to go and create a message. And you just need to think about, where can the experimentation happen? Where can we continue to experiment? But also, most people's business growth sits right in front of them. It sits with the customers that are currently in their base. It sits with people that have already come to their door. It's not about trying to cast your net into new areas that, unless you believe there's an opportunity to land grab. So my simple basic advice, which is tried and trusted, is whatever you do, commit to it. If you're going to stick and hunker down and look at cost reduction, stick to it, believe it, and build a team around it. If you're going to double up and you're going to go for it, but don't get caught in a halfway house. And that's true of any leadership, any marketing team. I think in terms of how I'm reading the room at the moment, I mean, particularly in the US, there is almost daily press news around particularly tech companies, which tend to lead where the market money and volatility goes, around layoffs. And it is no two ways about it, there are a sizable number of people that have lost their roles within those tech companies. I think with any number or any form of data, you've got to look at the statistic, and statistics tell you different data. And I think if you look at some of the big announcements that have happened recently, And I do want to caveat, it's not me being unempathetic to those that have been part of that process. If you look at the size of the businesses that swelled during COVID, there is this perception that during COVID, tech companies went wild. They just hired people for the sake of hiring people. They just didn't see the end of COVID coming, and they were overinflated, and now they're trying to right size. In almost all of those large businesses, the number of people they hired during COVID versus the redundancy process they've gone through recently, it is disproportionate to the number of people that hired versus the number of people have left. It's not like they hired X amount of people in COVID and now all of those people are gone.
Yeah.
In many businesses, which inappropriate to name, 95% of the people that were hired in the upside in COVID are still there. But most of these tech businesses, they made acquisitions. So over the last couple of years, they found efficiencies. Most of these tech companies that have made redundancies have scaled into other markets, and therefore they are overinflated with teams. And whilst I don't know the inner workings of all of them, you can almost go back to every large tech company that's made large layoffs, and the number of people they hired over the last 2 years is still disproportionately more than the number of people unfortunately have been affected by redundancy. In any recession, it is all around consumer confidence. The amount of money in the world does not get less. People sit on money slightly more. They don't want to take it out their wallets. They put money away. And the only way you get people to start spending money and driving economies is confidence. You've got to give people confidence that we're through this. And I'm a big believer that if the news outlets spent as much time talking about the good, positive economic situations that are happening, you drive creativity, which gives confidence to hire people, to grow bigger. But I think it's really important to always think about the amount of money in the world has not gone down. It's just in other pockets. It's stuck in places. And the only way you get money to move around is to give confidence to spend.
Yeah, that is so good. So good. That was such great advice. Especially, I know it's like almost if you're gonna go, you're gonna do it. Like you're driving, jumping off a diving board or doing a backflip, don't pause halfway, otherwise you're gonna get hurt.
It's in any walk of life, just either do it or don't. But don't half.
Yes, I'm going to take that even outside of marketing. Like you said, that's just great life advice right there. And just really a great way to end our conversation, Jordan. This has been so helpful. I've learned so much myself. Such great advice and best practices and just overall knowledge that you bring to the table. So thank you so much. I know our listeners are going to get a lot from this conversation today.
Megan, thank you so much. I'm glad we made it happen. It was really fun. So thanks for inviting me on.
You're so welcome. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks,
Bye.
Megan.